this is not a matter of technology, nor is it a matter of skill. This is a matter of perspective. It's because we see the world through a peephole that our options only feel as big as the peephole is. But once we expand the aperture of our perspective, more solutions begin to present themselves to us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Identity Architects, the InfoSum podcast that spotlights the leaders in the industry shaping the future of marketing. I'm your host, Ben Cicchetti, and this week I am joined by Dr. Marcus Collins, who is a professor of marketing at the University of Michigan and the best-selling author of For the Culture. Dr. Marcus Collins, welcome to Identity Architects.
Thanks for having me, Ben. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to learn from you. I'm excited to pick your brains a little bit. For anyone who might be unfamiliar, can you just give us a quick introduction to yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm a professor at the Ross School of Business, University of Michigan, but I study culture and its influence and impact on human behavior. Had a long career putting things in the world on behalf of brands, whether there were CPG companies, entertainment companies, individuals like Beyonce and run digital strategy for her. I've always put things in the world, even when I was a budding but unfortunately unsuccessful songwriter, putting things in the world to hopefully put a dent in the world. This has been what has excited me the most throughout my life, and I feel extremely fortunate that I get to do this for a living.
I love that. And just getting to subtly name drop Beyonce is pretty cool as well. So.
Not bad. Not bad.
Amazing. Well, we will start with our rapid fire questions to get to know you a little bit better. Starting with, what's your earliest memory of advertising or marketing in general?
Oh, I think that I probably remember Like Mike, If I Can Be Like Mike. I mean, those
Yeah.
that comes to mind. They're like a lot of a lot of those mnemonics I can remember. Like, Mikey, he likes it, like Life cereal. But I think the ones that were the most impactful to me, where I was very cognizant of it, was probably the Sprite Obey Your Thirst work in the early 90s, the early to mid 90s. Because I was coming of age. I was an adolescent. I was a teen then. And I was really trying to find my own voice, if you will. And the brand was a champion of this idea of following your gut, trusting your intuition. And it had found the perfect bedfellow to move that idea forward. That was hip hop music. And I was a huge fan of hip hop. I was considering myself a part of the hip hop community, if you will. And a lot of the stewards of the genre were highlighted in that work. And I just kind of saw myself in it. So while I remember the mnemonics as a kid, that's the one that I think has tattooed itself in my brain.
Yeah, it's amazing how ads like that can just take you back to that moment. I remember that campaign was, in the UK anyway, was part of the NBA finals. I think in 95, 96, it was the Bulls, it was Sonics. And that my grandpa's from Seattle, so the Sonics being in the final was a big deal. And so that kind of really sticks with you. So it's amazing how much it can just kind of take you back to that instantly.
I mean, it's. I think this is where advertising, I think, is underestimated. That we think about advertising as this sort of promotional vehicle to get people to buy things, and it does operate that way too. But the best advertising transcends promotional work to become cultural production. They become expressions of who we are and how we see the world. So that Obey Your Thirst work, it was so intertwined into who I was at the time and who I wanted to be, and that those ads were cultural production for people like me. And I think about it so fondly. I mean, I still love the brand and the product, but I really love the brand because of the way it was able to have this permanence on me because of what it meant temporally at the time.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you mentioned what you wanted to be. So let's take ourselves back to that time. What did you want to be when you were younger?
If you asked me when I was a young kid, I would have told you Michael Jackson. But if you would have asked me in my teen years, 100% I wanted to be the fifth member of Boys to Men. That was
Yeah.
my goal in life. I mean, like, you couldn't tell me that wasn't going to happen, man. Like, I wouldn't say I was obsessed because that is that would be a reductive word. I felt like I was my imagination was captured by who they were and what they signify, what they represented, and where I was in my life. They were everything. And
Yeah.
I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to perform. I wanted to be on stage, and I wanted to do it with those guys because I felt like I was one of them.
I love that. And we've got a musical question coming up. So I'm
Oh yeah,
sensing I'm going to get a response to it. Obviously, being part of the group didn't work out, unfortunately. So what was
no.
your first job in either advertising or marketing?
So marketing came later in my career when I went to school in uni to study material science engineering because I thought that polymers were cool, right? And while I I I don't know if I would describe them as cool today, but at the time I thought they were interesting. I just wasn't interested. And
Mm,
it took me about a year to realize that pretty early. And I told my parents, I don't think I want to be an engineer. And they said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I think I want to write love songs. And they were like, you must be smoking crack because that's not going to happen. Um, so I finished my degree in engineering, but I went straight to the music industry, writing songs, writing and producing music. Um, and I started a music startup with my co-founder, one of my old classmates from school. And as we're kind of getting this thing off the ground, I absorbed the marketing communications role for the company. I think that was my first sort of introduction into marketing. And once the songwriting career didn't pan out, I said, well, I think I should probably better understand this business world that I live in. So maybe I should go to business school. And since I did like the marketing component of launching the company, and I felt that was the most creative form of a business, I figured I guess I'd study marketing. And my first gig uh, when I made that realization was doing partner marketing at Apple, doing partner marketing for iTunes, managing our relationship with Nike Sports Music.
I mean, that's quite the incredible first role in marketing to take on.
That was my
What do you?
technical first role outside of the
Uh,
company that wasn't my own, and I
yes.
am very, very grateful for it. Absolutely.
So, what do you think it was? You mentioned kind of the storytelling and the creative element about it. What do you think it was that drew you to make marketing your life? And then, kind of, what keeps you in that world to this very day?
At the time, marketing was the shortcut for advertising to me. I thought marketing and advertising was synonymous. In fact, I think if you
Mhm.
ask most people in the world what is marketing, they probably say ads or
Yeah.
point to some advertising. So I was one of them. I thought that's what marketing was. So I was fascinated by the storytelling aspect of it all. I was a songwriter who wrote songs that told stories. This was the storytelling mechanism of business. Psh, bet I could do that.
Mm.
If I can, in my mind, if I can write songs in 4/4, then I can write a 30-second spot. Is kind of how I was thinking. Um, and then I realized that marketing is much, much more than this. And actually, it was the widening of the aperture of what marketing was that made it that much more compelling for me. What I realized looking at the rearview mirror, you decades into my career now is that what I thought was fascinating about polymers, carbon chains when I was an engineer is actually the same thing that got me excited about writing music, producing music. And it's actually the same thing that gets me excited about marketing and marketing communications. And even now on the scholarship side, that we were able to put things in the world, tell stories, tell narratives that not only activated one person, but allowed them to connect with other people
Mm.
and ultimately catalyze these network effects, right? Carbon chains and the plastics that we use, they're just network effects of carbons. Music, right? When people get so enamored and connected to an artist, they find other people who feel that same connection and they build relationships. to establish these networks. The same thing with marketing communications. When a brand feels like it's an extension of me, I can't help myself but to share with other people who see the world the way I do, to connect us together. And the same thing goes with what I do now as a scholar, right? My hope is to put ideas in the world that activate people, that not only make them better at their gig, but more importantly, help them see the world better so they can connect with other people in a more meaningful way. It's easy for me to articulate it now, but then it was really the storytelling part that I felt was so fascinating about marketing. Not just the marketing communications, but the going to market in an effort to get people to adopt behavior. That if you're able to tell the story in a more evocative way, then people who see the world similarly will not only be moved, but they will then go move on your behalf. And that, to me, I just found to be just a very fascinating and humbling career path to choose.
Yeah, and I guess in your role now and in your role over the last decade or so, you must have got to interact with so many different people at different stages of their career. So, what advice do you or would you give to someone who's just starting in their career in marketing, in advertising, or in kind of the media industry?
Curiosity. You have to be radically, radically curious, just constantly curious. And that requires a few things. First, it requires understanding a truth that the world is not objective, it's subjective. That things aren't the way they are the way that we are, which means that our reality is only one permutation of reality, that our truth is only merely one candy, one piece of candy in the pinata of
Mhm.
meanings that exist out in the world, which is a humbling stance to have. To go, okay, I see the world this way, but that doesn't mean that that is the objective truth of the world. And now, because I understand this, I now, secondly, have empathy. There's a self aware perspective taking. I now have the capacity, the want, the facilities to say, all right, I know the world isn't objective, it's subjective. Now I want to go adopt the lenses of other people to see the world through their eyes, through their meaning making system. Set aside my biases, my ethnocentrisms, to apprehend the world through the lens of someone who sees the world differently. And in doing so, the world manifests differently. It opens up to us. And when we do that, we go, oh, okay. So this is the reality of these people. So when I talk to them, when I tell stories, when I engage them, when I create experiences, I'm going to do it through the lens of which they see the world, where they make meaning. In doing so, they feel seen, they feel heard, and those are sort of the the antecedent to connection. So if you are in school studying marketing, if you are a CMO, and if you're everything in between, curiosity is the most important trait to have, because not only does it help unlock truths for us, not only does it help propel uh, empathy for us, but it's also the one thing that I don't think you can teach. You can't teach people to be curious. You can help stoke curiosity in people. You can help sort of activate or wake up that dormant part of them that is curiosity. Uh, but if you have it, that's the biggest cheat code in your toolbox that you probably are not using. Curiosity. No matter where you are in your career as a marketer, curiosity is it's the it's the Excalibur to marketing practice.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. And I think about myself and various marketers, CMOs I know at various stages of their career. It's the ones that kind of force themselves outside of their bubble on a regular basis, right? To be able to see the world, to your point, through different eyes and through different lenses, to have that empathy. They're always the ones that are pushing the boundaries. And I think marketing is such a fast paced, ever changing career and world that to kind of get stuck in your own idea of what works and what's going to resonate with people is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to think about, kind of a two-part question, I guess. What keeps you awake at night? So what's
Uh,
that stress factor? And then the flip side of that is what gets you up in the morning, and therefore what is that kind of motivational factor for you?
yeah, I think what keeps me up at night is probably the fear of being unuseful. Now, some would say the fear of irrelevance of being irrelevant. And I don't think that that's the case. I think relevancy is a byproduct of usefulness. And my hope is that, the work I do now, now that I've left the agency world, it's a bit more abstract. I write and I give
Mhm.
talks, and I don't call it a consultancy. I do a professor in residence where I work with C-level and VPs of companies to help them integrate the scholarship of what we know of culture, cultural consumption, and even organizational culture to help optimize their dealings, right? How they
Mhm.
work as a company. That's kind of abstract. When I was in the agency world, I wrote briefs and I made strategies and I sold ideas. Like, it was very, very clear the service that I provided. Right. And if I did that well, no doubt I was of use. And even being inside the organization, the collective work of all the people was of great use to our clients. So I didn't really worry about my usefulness then. I was just concerned about ensuring that I'm living up to my full potential. The thing that keeps me up at night is worrying, or not worrying, is just a concern that is, what is my work, what I create, what I put in the world, is it of use for people? To that end, what gets me excited about waking up in the morning is the opportunity to do that very thing.
Yeah.
I get excited about serving people. I get excited about being useful. You know, the thing I want to be able to achieve in life is to realize my full potential. And I believe, it's just the way I see the world. I believe that we're all put on this earth to serve. I would say, to serve God and serve each other, right? If you push me, I'd say that we serve God by the way in which we serve each other, right? So my hope in prayer, my most earnest prayer, is that I live up to my full potential by the way that I serve. And what keeps me up at night is the fear that I have missed the mark, the fear that I have not lived up to the very best, the full fidelity of what I could be, and that is a servant.
Yeah. I guess that must therefore also unlock an incredible level of drive, to your point, in you, because you have that quote unquote fear of that. It kind of pushes you to continually look for new ways that you can serve better or serve more, or whatever it might be. You mentioned earlier just how, or I think I said it actually, our industry moves at such a quick pace, marketing changes at such a quick pace, therefore it's incredibly complex. So I'm curious to get your response to this, which is, how would you describe marketing or what you do in marketing to a 10-year-old?
Oh, um, it's interesting because I have a 10-year-old.
There we go.
and
So you probably had to
and
do this.
yeah, and I put it to her the exact same way I put it to CMOs. Marketing is going to market, going to the people, right? The 1455 Oxford Dictionary defines marketing as going to market, right? Going to market, going to the people. So I bring ideas to the people. So if you say you grew carrots, right? Uh, if you never take your carrots to market, you're not a farmer, you're a gardener, right? Say you're a songwriter. If you never bring your songs to market, you aren't you aren't you aren't a creator. You're a hobbyist, right?
Mhm.
It's bringing your ideas to the marketplace, to the people, that changes you from doing a thing to being in the business of doing said thing. So marketing is going to market. And why do we go to market? To get people to adopt behavior. So we go to market, and the best marketers are the ones who are able to get people to move.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, I teased a musical question a little bit earlier
Yes.
on, and here it is.
Okay.
If it was a song that was a soundtrack to your life, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. There's a song that were the soundtrack to my life. What would it be? Um, you know what? That's a hard one. But I tell you, the one that sits on my heart. It's a song by Kanye West, the old Kanye. Don't judge me.
Yeah.
Um, it's a song called "I Wonder," and it's
Mm,
a sample where he says, "I wonder, and I wonder if you know how it feels, what it feels to find your dreams come true." And I do believe that I'm living a life that was better than I dreamt, you know, in all of its hardship, because it's not without its challenges. Um, but if you asked me 20 years ago, 25 years ago, what I wanted to do was like, I wanted to put songs in the world that impacted people, you know, that people heard and it made them feel something and it impacted how they then engaged in the world. I get to do that now, just not in 4/4, just not in 6/8, not through
yeah.
music, but through other storytelling. If I need an honorable mention there, it's a song by PJ Morton called Mountains and Molehills, you know, that it's all about chasing your dreams. You know, I would like to say that I'm a dreamer, but I think about myself as a professional dream chaser. You know that I believe that it's possible. Like I'm bold enough to believe that it's possible, not because of me, rather, but because, as the alchemist would say, that the world conspires on our behalf when we know what we're after. So I believe that fervently, and I think that those songs uh, capture that essence in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, I love that. And we have a playlist on Spotify that I will now get to add that to. I'll add them both, which are great additions. I want to dig a bit deeper because there's something that's come up. Obviously, we talked about your book for the culture, which has become this kind of essential reading for marketers seeking to understand what
Thank you.
drives human behavior. And actually, I think a lot about the perspective of legacy, right? And
Mm.
you've written a piece that will now live on shelves, whether they're digital or physical, for hopefully forever, right? So you've left
Yeah.
this kind of physical stamp on the world. But I want to dig into kind of the thoughts of the book and kind of putting that together. How has your definition of culture evolved as the
Oof.
world has become more fragmented, more algorithmic, and in the advertising world, it's become much more identity driven than
Mm.
anything else?
You know, if you asked me early in my career, I would tell you that my definition of culture today is so more rigorous and vivid than it was then. You know,
Mhm.
I think I suffered from what many marketers suffer from now. Is that I used to think of culture as basically a shortcut for popularity. You know, that culture is music, it's what we wear, it's what we're doing, what people are listening to, where they're going, where they're watching, how they're talking, how they're dancing. And while all those things are cultural, they are not culture. You know, and that's a big issue that we have in marketing. We talk about getting our ideas out in the culture. What we really mean is make our ideas popular. You know, we're going to
Yeah,
study culture. We're going to study what people are doing,
yeah,
the zeitgeist. Um, but culture, as Emil Durkheim, one of the founding fathers of sociology, would attest that culture is a system. It's a system of conventions and expectations that demarcate who we are and govern what people like us do. And if you subscribe to said system, a certain culture, then your behaviors, your artifacts, your language, your works, your cultural production become expectations of what people like us do. Um, Having that understanding now, I mean, which didn't come by happenstance, by the way, you know, I read a lot. I read a lot, self-directed, and then I studied it. I studied consumer culture theory when I did my doctoral work at Temple University. Right, I was very much curious by this idea of culture, and have since dedicated my career going forward to the exploration and dissemination of knowledge. when it comes to culture. So when I think about culture today, it's, if nothing else, it's actually bearing out the same things that Emil Durkheim and those folks told us well over a century ago, that we are, as a species, we are designed to live, to dwell and reside in small clans,
Yeah.
groups, tribes, not these like major, many, many millions people over metropolises that we live in today that we call cities, right? We weren't designed for that. That didn't happen. It was a late invention. Didn't really start happening until the Industrial Revolution, when people left their towns, left their villages to go to the city to pursue the capitalistic dream, right? To,
Yeah.
to make money. So it's still wired in us to be in community with people like us, people who see the world the way we do, people who subscribe to the same cultural conventions. So we find them elsewhere. Emil Durkheim talked about, we found it through consumption in the 1800s. Today, I'd say we find them in the worlds of zeros and ones. We find ourselves in rabbit holes that we call the internet, right? In
Mm.
different subreddits where they are fragmentations of the broader populace. They are subcultures of a broader cultural backdrop where we find people who are like ourselves. And all these things are driven by our want to project our identity. Our identity
Yeah.
projects become expressions of these communities, their works, and the brands and branded products that signify them.
So then how, because I spend a lot of time thinking about this from an authentic representation, authenticity perspective, right? So as a member of the queer community, it's been very evident to us when brands have turned up in an unauthentic way. And it doesn't
Yeah,
feel like they are, to your point, they're trying to tap into us rather than actually being part of the culture and feeling like it's naturally part of the
that's right.
community. So how do you recommend brands kind of navigate that complexity, right? So how can
Mm,
brands tap into and reach culture without looking like they're just trying to, in the queer community call it like pink washing, just trying to tap into the money that sat in my wallet.
that's right. It's like when Ritz Crackers started saying, "Slay girl, you gagged with that." It's like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? Right? What was happening here? Um, you know, it's worth noting. If you read For the Culture, you hear me use the phrase "tap into culture." Um, I don't actually use that language today. Continuing to educate myself and engage in this world of culture, I realized that that vernacular is actually exploitative in nature. What does a tap do? You put a tap into a tree and
Mm,
it sucks out all its nutrients, right? That is, it benefits the person doing the tapping in, but it only extracts from the culture in which the person is trying to benefit. That's not how culture operates. you know, the idea for brands who want to quote unquote tap into culture is to not tap in at all. It's to contribute. You
mm,
engage through contribution. If you want to engage in a conversation, what do? You add something to it. You say, "Hey, I heard about this blah 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 the other day too. That's kind of like that." You go, "Oh man, come on in, say more." Right. And the
yeah.
same thing kind of goes here with brands who want to engage in these cultural communities. You have to have a point of view about the world and bring something to the world that that is these people's point of view, their framing, if you will, right? These collectives, they see the world a certain way and they navigate the world based on the cultural conventions of people like them. Brands who are able to contribute to them, people go, "Oh man, thank you so much." And they use the brand to not only project their own identity, but to help their people like them. And in doing so, you create this sort of cycle of reciprocity that now the brand gets to benefit because it contributed.
Yeah, I completely agree. I often talk about Absolute Vodka and the fact that they were one of the first, or I think they were the first kind of premium spirit brand to turn up for the LGBTQ plus
That's
community. They
right.
started advertising in gay magazines in the 80s when it just wasn't the thing to do. And they
That's
have
right.
therefore built up this ability to show up and this ability to be part of the community because it's a long held allyship that they have shown. Um, Obviously, living in the world that I live in with InfoSum, in the world of data collaboration, we're very conscious that in this age of data and algorithms, and now obviously AI, how do you believe marketers can ensure they're still focusing on the people in those communities and not just the, CMOs more than ever are being held accountable to boardroom metrics? So how can they make sure they're focusing on people when shaping their strategies for 2026, 2027 and beyond?
I think this is probably one of the great regrets of our rush for analytics in the early 2010s. As illuminating as the zeros and ones were for us to get an understanding of what people were doing, the way they were engaging, and our ability to sort of look at these micro moments and find ways to optimize them, which were totally beneficial, it forced us, incentivized us rather, to prioritize the machine and deprioritize
Mm,
humanity. That when we were able to sort of track how things were happening at a time where our imaginations for capitalism were becoming shorter and shorter, shorter with regards to the time horizon in which we were evaluating if something was working or not. Right, we're constantly looking at the ticker to see where
yeah.
the stock price is. So while that's happening simultaneously, I can actually look closely at how things are performing in the marketplace. Those things began to inform one another, right? At least dispositionally for organizations. So CMOs were like myopically focused on the numbers. What did the zeros and ones say? What did the numbers say? And in doing so, we prioritized being better engineers and deprioritized being better artisans. And the truth of the
Mm,
matter is that artisans have greater connections to people do than engineers. And if marketing is about going to market, going to the people, then we have to understand the people. And in our rush to increase the information at our disposal, we have uh, we've fortunately confused information for intimacy. We think because we have information on people that we know who they are, those two things are not analogous. So, in all our want to find more information, as the great engineers that we are, leveraging the machines at our disposal, we have become worse artisans, and as a result, become less connected with humanity.
So how do you therefore see the relationship between data and culture, if there is any? So how can brands, avoid mistaking metrics for meaning?
Yeah. Well, that requires intimacy, proximity,
Yeah.
closeness. That you have to first start by saying, these aren't customers,
Mhm.
right? These aren't machines who eat messages and crap cash. These are human beings. And
Yeah.
these human beings are cultural creatures, right? They abide by an orthodoxy that is culturally negotiated and constructed. When we see them like that, we no longer call them Gen Zs. We no longer refer to them by these labels that we affix to them to help us better describe them, but don't accurately identify them. We start looking at them based on who they are and how they see the world. And by its very nature, it starts to activate the human inside of us. We become more human. And in doing so, we're able to start seeing the world through their lenses, right? We adopt a sense of empathy, that we start perceiving the world through the lenses of people who see the world differently. This is the only way that we know of studying culture, right? We study culture through ethnographic means. That is,
Yeah.
we immerse ourselves in the cultural, the cultural habitat environment of the people that we want to study, to set aside our ethnocentrism only for a moment to apprehend the world through their meaning making lenses. The information alone doesn't do that. The information that we acquire help create the tapestry of meaning that we extract. It's like every data point is a stroke of the paintbrush. And our job as marketers is to look at the broader canvas to say, okay, what does it mean? What is it trying to say? And because of that meaning, we engage the people accordingly.
Yeah, and I think that taps into something I've heard you speak about, which is this idea. that shared beliefs are more powerful than shared demographics, right? Which is what you
Oh
were
yeah.
kind of just saying. So,
Oh
what
yeah.
does that mean for brands and how they should think about the things that they're obsessed with, which is like segmentation,
Mm,
targeting, quote
mm,
unquote identity? So, how
yeah.
how can that kind of shape it for them?
Well, segmentation targeting is still important. STP,
Yeah.
segmentation targeting and positioning, still important. The challenge is that, the orthodoxy of the way by which we segment the market, taking a heterogeneous market and turning them to homogeneous like clusters, is that we base the characteristics of those homogeneous like clusters based on characteristics that make it easy for us to identify the people, right? We
Mhm.
looked at age, race, gender, household income, geography, education level. These become easy ways which we're able to source that information about people. But just because, you're 35 years old, and you have this education level doesn't, is not a predictor of what you're likely to do. Right. And if our job as marketers to get people to adopt behavior, then we should be segmenting the market based upon the characteristics that actually drive behavior. And what drives behavior, one might ask? Culture. There is no external force more influential to human behavior than culture, full stop. So if we're able to identify people by their cultural subscription, then we have a better idea of what they're likely to do based upon what's expected of people who are like them. I do this exercise often, where I say, okay, which Alex is more committed to running? Alex, who's a Gen Z demographic, Alex who likes to run, psychographic, or Alex who is a runner, identity. Clearly, the latter Alex, Alex who is a runner, that's the Alex
Yeah.
that's most likely to run. Why? Because she's a runner and
Yeah.
runners run. That Alex runs even if it's cold outside, it's raining, she's tired, she had a long night, she doesn't want to do it. She runs anyway. Why? Because people like me do something like this, right? Demographics never get anywhere close to this because, oh, by the way, that Alex that's a she could be Alex a he or a they.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
Alex could be 17 years old or 57 years old. That Alex could live in the suburbs or the city. That Alex could be from Michigan or Mumbai, right? Like the demography doesn't describe the Alex. It doesn't get to who Alex really, really is. It's identity, the way Alex self-identifies, that gives us some predicament or some predictor, rather, of what they're likely to do. And if our job as marketers to influence behavior, then we should be segmenting based on some predictor of behavioral adoption, such that we can identify them, target them, and activate them accordingly.
Yeah, and look, those data points. The exciting thing to me, anyway, as I look at it from the through the lens of data collaboration, is those data points are available, right? So if you're looking at like who's a runner, like I mean, Apple probably has that data, Nike probably has that data. So you have opportunities now more than ever to tap into those data sources in kind of a safe, privacy centric way to actually reach people who are acting on the behaviors you think they're acting on, rather than guessing on the behaviors you think they might be having.
Exactly. This is not a matter of technology, nor is it a matter of skill.
Mm,
This is a matter of perspective. It's because we see the world through a peephole that our options only feel as big as the peephole is. But once we expand the aperture of our perspective, more solutions begin to present themselves to us. So, to your point, that data exists. In fact, if you want to know what runners believe, how they see the world, what they do in the world, then go listen to runners talk. And guess what? There's a way to do that. Social networking platforms provide that technology that allows us to observe the discourse of communities, people who are in community, talking about the things that are meaningful to the community so that we're able to extract meaning as a marketer. And then, fancy this, we can go, okay, how can I help them?
yeah.
How can I contribute
Mhm.
to these collectives of people based on their cultural subscription such that they're able to do the thing they actually really want to do. And I, as a brand, have become the mechanism that facilitates this for them. And guess what they do? They go sing my praises. They go
Yeah.
preach my gospel because my gospel is theirs. And I get to benefit from that reciprocity. It's I say it this way, it is a simple idea, but it's not easy. right? It's just like
I think,
losing weight. It's a simple
yeah.
idea, but it's not easy, right? But it all starts with perspective because if you believe you can't lose weight, you're not going to lose weight.
Mhm.
As a marketer, if we change our perspective about how we see people and the underlying physics of humanity, then we start to widen the aperture of the world in which it presents itself to us, and then, ergo, how we engage in it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think what that does when you change the perspective to, how can I help? What can I bring to this community or to this culture more than kind of how do I quote unquote tap into this culture? It kind of changes that perspective. And then what it does is it allows you to build something that's an incredibly scarce commodity now, which is trust, especially in kind of these digital spaces we've got.
Yeah.
I talked about it a little bit earlier on around the queer community. There was definitely a sense of you've seen brands tap into the queer community. And then when it got slightly uncomfortable, they very quickly tapped out of the queer community and haven't come back. And
Bud
that's
Light. Bud Light. Excuse me. Sorry. Excuse me. Ugh.
and that's gonna, that creates a lack of trust, right? And so therefore, whether they come back or not and try and do this again in the future or not, like we have a long memory and we're going to remember those who showed up when it was inconvenient to show up.
That's right.
So what role do you see cultural alignment playing in rebuilding trust between brands and communities that they want to serve, to your kind of, to use your phrase?
Well, to your point, trust is acquired in drips, but lost in buckets, as they say.
Mm,
Small, lightweight interactions over time, we begin to build trust, right? But then once that trust is broken, it is catastrophic. So my advice to brands have always been: listen, not only are we trying to establish trust, we're also trying to establish meaning, both of which require, you know, multiple expressions of intent. So you show up and you keep showing up and you keep showing up and you keep showing up consistently. So that people go, oh, this must just be reality, right? And, I like my favorite construct for trust is the mechanism that absorbs uncertainty. So when something shows up often, frequently,
yeah,
consistently, we go, it just must be what it is. It becomes reality, right?
yeah,
And it absorbs the uncertainty of if it's going to be there tomorrow or what it's going to do. And same thing goes with brands, right? When you show up consistently over time, then people point to you, go like, oh, that's the thing. Like that's who they are, that's what they do, until you're
yeah,
not. And they go, I don't know what this thing is anymore. I thought it was this. Now it's no longer that. So if brands want to establish trust, if they want to uh, in garner themselves into this mechanism that absorbs uncertainty, they have to first know who they are and then show up said way in a way that is consistent.
yeah. I agree. I want to revisit your incredible career a little bit because you have worked with some culturally defining brands. You mentioned Apple, you mentioned Queen Bee herself, Beyonce. What did those experiences teach you about balancing kind of creativity with
Mm,
commercial goals? And then how
mm.
can modern marketers apply those lessons to what they are doing every single day today?
Yeah, as a failed musician, I've never felt like this tension. I never felt the tension pressingly between the creation of cultural work, we call it music
Mhm.
or art, and its commercial promise. In fact, my understanding has always been that the best cultural production finds itself in a home, in the hearts and minds of people that lead to more economic prosperity, right? So when I entered the world of marketing, particularly on the advertising side, I never found attention there. But over time, especially as it became more critical of my work as a scholar, or in my work as a scholar, I realized that there that tension does very much exists, especially when that tension is driven by sort of insatiable want for more. So, humor me here. Humor me. Uh, be patient with me here. You know,
Yeah.
music at a time felt like this gift that artists would give us. And right around the late 1990s, early 2000s, this is in the States at least, the highest point of revenue uh, driving for the industry. Artists will put out a full album with only one or two good songs, knowingly one or two good songs, and the rest of the album was just filler fluff. And
Right.
people paid $17 for that product. And they got the album, was like, what is this, man? They felt deceived. They
Mm,
felt deceived, right? It wasn't just that, that artist didn't have the best outing, which people had a lot of grace and tolerance for. If like the industry was engineering itself to extract as much value as possible without giving the gift of music as we know it to be. And it was right at this time, 1999, 2000, that technology like Napster and Kazaa
yeah.
were just getting its sea legs. And it created an opportunity for the music industry to be disrupted in an irreversible way, right? And people felt totally justified pirating music illegally from artists. Why? Because they felt that they'd been fleeced,
Mm,
right? So while the commercial exchange of art between artists and the public was one that people were totally fine with when they were balanced. But when it became like, oh, I'm just going to take advantage of the trust that you had given the music industry and the artists you said you love so much, when that trust was broken, people were like, fine, whatever. It's all the gloves are off. Like we're
yeah.
just gonna do whatever we want to do. I find a very similar reality in the world of marketing today that I think for long, people used to, like in the 50s and 60s, people relied on advertising for information. They trusted what they heard. They're like, hey, if they say it this, so it must be that. It was
Yeah.
trust there. But what we realized is that there's just a lot of dishonesty in the marketing communications. And why is that? The marketing communications uh, position itself to try to grow at all costs.
Mm,
And as a result, it has broken the trust of the public. And, say 10 years ago, they're like, okay, great. You don't trust us as a brand. Fine, fine. We are going to partner with these people that we call influencers to do that
yeah.
for us. And now they became the trusted source. And so the public was like, hey, man, you don't even use that product.
Yeah.
Oh, man, you just telling me this because you get a cutback. Oh, man, this isn't even a real thing. So now what are
Yeah.
we finding? Even the influencers aren't as influential as they once were, which becomes sort of a death spiral when you look at the rise of AI and agentic marketing. You go, you know what? I don't need any of you all telling me anything. I'm going to get this services to do the shopping for me.
Yeah.
Right. We are at a crossroads is probably uh, too heavy handed. But as an industry, as a marketing industry, we are certainly at the precipice of great disruption.
Yeah.
And it's not just because the technology has evolved that it's eroding what would normally be the job of creative directors, copywriters, art directors, even strategists. It's not that alone. Um, What it really is, it is a betrayal of trust from the public to the marketing community, from advertising agencies to clients to media properties or media agencies uh, to marketing communicators. Like it's become it's become a cesspool of distrust. And as a result, you're finding a lot of disruption happening in places where we were totally fine with there being an exchange of goods for monetary value.
Yeah. I think to your point around kind of I think it's a super interesting time from a marketer perspective as AI comes to be, and we think about for how long, the advertising industry, how long news publications have been pinned up by what we've called programmatic advertising, which was this idea that you visit a website, your eyeballs become the money. Is how we started to calling people users rather than people.
Yeah.
Their eyeballs became the currency, and now to your point, more often than not, behavior is switching to actually it's going to be potentially agents visiting that site and gathering that information and then servicing it back to the consumer, to the person who's asking the question that they would have usually probably found somewhere else. I think AI is shaping so much of what we do, right? AI is shaping how we create, it's shaping how we target, it's shaping how we measure. From your perspective, can machines ever truly understand culture,
Hmm.
or will cultural intelligence always remain fundamentally at the human level?
Now, I believe that the the great discriminator between the machines and humanity is our ability to make meaning and our our disposition to create chaos. And by chaos, I mean actually in a fruitful way.
Mm,
Who would have thought that if you take a music sample from Steely Dan, a break beat by James Brown, a little bit of Parliament Funkadelics, and then someone talks over it, that you will get what we now know as hip hop,
yeah.
that you get De La Soul. Like a machine wouldn't even get there because it's that sort of catastrophe, this sort of mashing together of things that typically have nothing to do with each other because of our sheer curiosity, that you get these things that would normally have not presented itself. That is a human capacity. That is a human trait, which is what we call creativity, kind of subverting the orthodoxy, as Dan Wyden would put it. Meaning, simultaneously, is constantly being negotiated and constructed. And while the technology today, right now, uh, are able to tell us what things mean today and what they used to mean, what they'll mean in the future, those things are still yet to be constructed and negotiated based on our imaginations that the machines currently do not have. And oh, by the way, the machines are their source code are biased by the imaginations of one, a few, or a group of people, and therefore the many permutations of reality that exists out there aren't represented in the source code of said technology. The biases miss that; those blinders there to completely miss that. So there'll always be this sort of anemia that can only be closed, that will be satiated by the human condition. And for that, I think that culture will always be a human endeavor. They may be able to look back in the rearview mirror and tell us what was. That's only because someone else has created that, right? It's
Yeah.
always based on the creations of today, which is why when you see music that's made through AI, it either sounds like current times or the past, nothing like the future, because the
Yeah.
future uh, is typically some collision of things that have no business being together, but yet works.
And to your point, back to one of your first points you made on the podcast, curiosity, right? It's the curiosity to see these
That's
two
right.
things. Do they go together? Can you take this and bring it to this world? So I think it's
That's
that
right.
kind of curiosity, which to today, AI doesn't have curiosity. It can only respond, but that's why it will remain, I believe, kind of a human endeavor. To your point,
I mean,
um,
yeah, and what the scholars even tell us that AI isn't thinking;
mm,
it's predicting based on the past.
yeah,
It's looking at all the myriad of options and say, okay, because of these things, what you're probably looking for is that. It's like spell check. It's
yeah,
like you said this, so based on the 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 grouping of letters, you're probably trying to say this. And
yeah,
while it's getting better at that, it's not forward thinking, you know, because forward
yeah.
thinking requires an imagination that the AI doesn't have. Even though we say things like it's hallucinating, that's just our colorful language to say it was wrong.
Yeah.
It made it up. It got the prediction wrong. Like it's not a hallucination. It's a mispredicament, a prediction.
Yeah, totally. As both kind of an educator, but also as a practitioner, I'm curious as we kind of end this episode of the of Identity Architects. What advice would you give to leaders who want to build culturally fluent teams that are
Mhm.
empathetic, diverse, and genuinely connected to the world outside of their walls? To our point earlier about kind of stepping outside of your bubble.
Yeah. I first start with hiring curious people.
Mhm.
Like I would hire curious people before I hire skilled people because I could teach you the skills, but I can't teach you to be curious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just needs some monicum of talent, needs a monicum of skills, but I would prioritize that and establish an organizational culture that helps fertilize that kind of cultural soil. The work I'm doing right now widens the aperture beyond the culture of consumption. I'm working on a book right now that's about the culture of work. And what I'm realizing is that, our ability to do this breakthrough, culturally contagious work is only because we have an organizational culture that has the wherewithal to make that work happen. I think of it like this, I talk about it in the book as it's like the front stage and the back of the stage. The front stage, you can have the best actors with the best costumery, the best scripts, the best director, right? But if the backstage isn't optimized, the production won't reach its fullest potential,
Yeah.
right? The backstage isn't operating at the highest fidelity possible. Neither will the front of the stage, no matter how many people are in the house, no matter how packed the theater is. So for business leaders who want to be better at engaging in cultural consumption, facilitating cultural consumption, they need to be better at facilitating the cultural environment of their employees, right? You can't satiate the external customer until you activate the internal customer, your people.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love this idea of how you can kind of continually build a culture of curiosity. I heard Stephen Bartlett talking earlier this year, and he talked about that's one of the goals he has in his business is to create an environment where people have the safety and the
Yeah,
confidence to be curious. And they talked
that's right.
about, I think it was like a 10-second change they made to his podcast, The Diary of a CEO, which had a double digit increase, a percentage increase in listener to subscriber. And
Mm,
it was just such a tiny change they made. And it was just someone's curiosity to say, well, we could just try this. Let's just
yeah.
experiment with this. And it's creating that culture of experimentation, that culture of curiosity is so massively critical for marketers, I think, kind of as we go forward.
And
And probably always has been.
it goes back to the question you asked me about the song that captures sort of my life, my career.
Yeah.
That honorable mention, that PJ Morton song, Mountains and Molehills. The refrain is, "You just got to try, try, try. You won't know unless you try." Right, and that's sort of how I've tried to live my life as a citizen of the world, as a parent, as a son, as a friend, as a husband, as a practitioner. Um, and wherever I've gone, I've tried to, at least my very best, to facilitate an environment where people are able to explore, to try with great psychological safety, because we know empirically that that gets us to better solutions and better operations for the organization.
Yeah. I love that. And I love a full circle moment. And we brought it back to the quickfire questions. Look, this podcast is all about people like you who are pioneering new ways to think, pioneering new ways to use data, pioneering new ways to reach consumers and to service and serve to consumers and to bring them to the culture. So when you look to people that you admire in the industry, who would you nominate for me to interview in an upcoming episode of
Oh,
Identity
that's
Architect?
that's really easy. This would be uh, I would want to call him my mentor, but he's not. He's more than that. He's more than that. It's a gentleman by the name of Grant McCracken. Grant McCracken is an anthropologist, cultural anthropologist. and his work created the foundation, the bedrock upon which scholars like me have been able to scaffold in our thinking. Um, I didn't know Grant originally. I just knew of his work during my doctoral studies, and he actually reached out to me on Twitter because I gave a talk and I used one of his frameworks in my talk, and someone posted a photo of me with the slide behind me. He was like, "Hey, I know that. Like, that's pretty great. Thanks for citing my work." And I was like, "Thanks for citing your work, dude. Thank you for doing the work. Are you kidding me? Like you have completely changed me and so many
Yeah.
people like me." And I was able to strike up a friendship with him. I even used a quote. Well, I should say he gave me a quote that I put in my dissertation. I was defending it. And I was like, look, if Grant McCracken say it's good, everybody needs to shut up and just give me my doctorate, you know? Um, but he moved from being sort of this inspiration to being a collaborator. So I've worked with Grant for years now. We've written together, we've done research together, we've done consultancy work together. But more importantly, I get to call him a friend, you know.
Yeah.
And I couldn't think of many people, many more people uh, worthy of that distinction of a nomination in this regard than Grant. He's the best.
Amazing. Well, we will definitely reach out to him and try and get him on the podcast. Marcus, thank you so much for joining me on Identity Architects. This has genuinely been one of the most fascinating conversations I've had on marketing. It's really resonated with me, and it's meant a lot. We will put a link to so people can pick up your book, For the Culture. I do recommend it to people, and it's definitely worth picking up. So we'll put a link in the description of this episode. But Marcus, thank you so much for being on Identity Architects with me today.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.